introduction, we're going to talk about how the movement is going to gain momentum. And first of all, we have a lot of student activists. They are going to have sit-ins. And a sit-in is exactly what it sounds like. A protest in which you sit. If you guys get that wrong on the test, I will make fun of you. Okay? Now, probably the most well-known of the sit-ins took place in Greensboro, North Carolina. And in this particular instance, a black student went to this diner. He ordered donuts. They said, "No, you're black. We're not going to serve you." But he refused to get up, and he sat there until they closed. At the Smithsonian, they actually have the counter that he sat in Greensboro, which is kind of cool, but I didn't remember to bring a picture of it, so anyhow. They also have wade-ins and read-ins. Okay? If you think segregation is absolutely stupid, it gets stupider. Okay? The ocean, the beaches were segregated. So they had wade-ins because here, you got the black beach. And then 100 yards down this way, you got the white beach. And I just want to say, hello, you're swimming in the same ocean. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But what they did at these wade-ins is they would go and they'd stand in the water and then they'd get arrested. And what they should get arrested for is wearing those booty shorts out in public. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just very pleased that in today's society, gentlemen wear longer swimming trunks. And ladies, I wish that we, as a gender, would wear more conservative swimsuits because, you know, sometimes once you see stuff, you can't unsee it. Am I right? It's true. It's burned into your retina. Somebody in my last hour, 5th hour, told me something about skinny dipping, and I was like,
Was it Philip?
who?
Philip?
No. No, it was actually my 5th hour. But anyhow, they had read-ins because libraries were segregated, black-only books, white-only books, and so they'd go in the library and they'd read, and that was scandalous. Okay, so then we have an organization that's created called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. And you might put a star next to this girl's name because she'll be on your worksheet today, Ella Baker. She's the young lady who organized this. And this organization, they do exactly what their name sounds like. They're a bunch of college-age students who try to use nonviolence to create change. And the goal of the SNCC was to basically start a grassroots movement, build one from the ground up that encompassed all classes of Black Americans. You know, not just poor or rich, middle class, everybody. And not just, you know, blacks from the north, blacks from the south, from the east, from the west, everywhere to get a part of this movement. All right, now let's talk about the Freedom Riders. And you guys watched a video about this just the other day. The reason that the Freedom Riders are going to target interstate transportation is because when a bus goes from one state to another, it's no longer controlled by one state. It's interstate transportation, so it's regulated by the federal government. Therefore, by riding a bus that goes through multiple states, they're going to force the federal government's hand because the federal government will have to do something. So the first Freedom Ride took place in 1961, and these bus riders along the way, you know, there were blacks and whites on these buses, but the blacks are going to sit in the front of the bus. Okay? When they left, their ultimate goal was to go from Washington, D.C. all the way down here to New Orleans. Not all of them made it that far. Okay? But as you can see from that map in the picture, these Freedom Rides are going through the Deep South, the very heart of the Deep South, where segregation is, you know, huge. But along the way, instead of just, you know, riding in the front of the bus, blacks, when they would stop at bus stops, they'd use the white-only restroom or drink out of the white-only water fountain. Now, as ridiculous of a law as that is, it was a law, and they were breaking it. But things got really bad when they got to Alabama. Because once they got to Alabama, they were attacked by, you know, a bunch of racist buttholes, the KKK, among others. But one of the buses, there were 2 of them in this particular instance, one bus was firebombed, and the second bus was attacked by people throwing rocks, throwing glass bottles, trying to attack the people on the bus. And so, excuse me, at this point, we realized something has to be done. Something must be done. So our president, our very attractive president, John F. Kennedy. Yes, sir.
Like the scene from The Butler?
What?
Oh, the movie The Butler?
Yeah, where his daughter's part of it or something like that.
Yes, I haven't seen that in a few years, but now I know what you're talking about since you reminded
A
me.
lot of it is like that.
Yes.
They do sit-ins and all that too.
They do. That's a good movie to watch. Another good movie to watch, well, it doesn't have sit-ins in it, but the movie The Help, because it shows a bunch of the different types of segregation that these people faced and the discrimination that they faced. But yeah, those are good movies. I'm glad you said that. I forgot about that. But back to our very gorgeous president, John F. Kennedy. He realized, I'm in charge of the federal government. I have to step in and do something about this. So he's going to assign police to protect the riders, basically to make sure, nobody's going to bomb their buses anymore. However, he kind of had to make a compromise, because if the people riding these buses, they get off and they go and use a white-only restroom when they're black, that's a violation of the law. Whether, it's stupid or not, it's a violation of the law. So Kennedy said, I'll protect you while you're riding, but you may get arrested if you break segregation codes. However, after these freedom rides took place, we're going to find that interstate transportation, riding on the buses themselves, that will be desegregated. Okay. However, just like Kennedy said, when a bunch of these freedom riders got to Mississippi, they were arrested because they did break the law. Even though it was stupid, they broke the law. Sorry. Yawns are contagious. Okay, now let's talk about James Meredith. James Meredith is a black Air Force veteran. Now that he's out of the Air Force, he's like, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to go to college. He wanted to go to the University of Mississippi, which is more commonly referred to as Ole Miss. Now, there's a tiny little problem with that. Ole Miss is white only. It is hardcore segregated. But James Meredith, that's where he wants to go. He has his heart set on it. And so he is going to enlist the help of civil rights activist Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers is going to be instrumental in forcing Ole Miss to integrate. Forcing, using the court system and whatnot to make sure that James Meredith is admitted to Ole Miss. Now, side note, and you might put a star next to it because I'll ask you about this on your worksheet. Unfortunately, Medgar Evers will be assassinated in 1963. He was on his front porch step and he was shot. James Meredith, later in his life, he's also going to be shot, but he lived. But that just shows you the high price that a lot of these people paid and they risked in order to fight for what was right. So anyhow, word got out that James Meredith was going to be on campus and that he was going to be a student at the University of Mississippi. So obviously, if you're upset, the only rational thing to do is to start a riot. Okay? So they had a big riot. They're thinking, oh, we'll scare James Meredith, he won't show up. But after this riot, there were 160 people injured and 2 people dead. But it didn't deter James Meredith. And when this happens, John F. Kennedy, he's like, listen, you can disagree with the law, but that does not mean you can disobey it. Perfect example of this. On the interstate from Lawton to Wichita Falls, Texas, okay, until you cross the Texas border, it's 70 miles an hour.
Oh.
70, okay? It's ridiculous. I totally disagree with that law. I think it should be 75 or even 80, in my personal opinion. However, if I disagree with that law, that doesn't mean I can break the law. Because if I get caught breaking the law, I'm probably going to get a ticket. Or I might not, but, somebody else might, okay, if they break the law. All right, and that's what John F. Kennedy is saying. You can disagree, but that doesn't give you the right to disobey. Because, I mean, what's to say, well, Alonzo says, well, I don't think murder should be a crime, so I'm going to go murder people. It doesn't work that way. Sorry, Alonzo. I don't think you're a serial killer, though. I don't get that vibe from you.
You should.
Okay, anyhow, moving on. Let's talk about Dr. King and Birmingham, Alabama. One of the reasons that Birmingham was so important in the civil rights movement, Dr. King said it was the most segregated city in the South. And there's a very good chance that was true. Okay? Now, Dr. King, he wants to have a series of nonviolent marches and sit-ins because they're trying to, protest segregation. And Martin Luther King Jr., he's tired of waiting. But the city of Birmingham says, listen, you can't have a demonstration. And Dr. King is like, have you read the First Amendment? Freedom of assembly? Actually, I can. And Birmingham is like, no, you can't. If you do it, we're going to arrest you. Just wait. Eventually, you'll get your rights. Just chill out. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. is like, I'm tired of waiting. I'm going to do something about it. So he marched, knowing that he would get arrested, and he went to jail. While he was in jail, he wrote a series of letters that have come to be known as Letters from Birmingham Jail. And I'm going to read one to you, and this explains why he can't just sit around. It says, perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering, as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that was just advertised on television, and you see tears rolling down her cheeks when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. He can't explain to his children why they can't go to certain places because of the color of their skin. They don't understand. And they shouldn't understand. It doesn't make sense. It is no different than if I told my daughters, girls, sorry, we can't go to McDonald's because we have curly hair. That's stupid. I mean, that's just plain stupid. But that's the exact thing that the whole country was telling Black Americans. That's what they were living with. So anyhow, Martin Luther King, eventually he gets out of prison. JFK might have had a little something to do with that. Okay, but then he plans on having more marches. Okay, the Public Safety Commissioner for Birmingham, Alabama is Eugene Conner, more commonly referred to as Bull Conner. Now, Bull Conner says, we will not tolerate demonstrations. We're not going to tolerate it. You can't do it. So Martin Luther King Jr., he says, we're going to do it anyhow. But he doesn't just have adults fighting this time. It's a children's crusade. There's going to be kids 12, 13, 14, 15 years old who participate in this. They're going to go to the public park, and they're going to be there just peacefully protesting segregation. At this point, police dogs are sent to attack these people, these children. They get awful bites. They're attacked. Then fire hoses are turned on them. Fire hoses that are so powerful they knock a grown man over. And then they're gassed. They're beaten. And the thing was, America watched as this happened. And not just America, the world. So I'm going to show you a video. I'm going to show you a video that talks about what happened here in Birmingham. And it's actually going to have people who lived through it, and it's going to interview them.
Martin Luther King Jr. came to Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 on a mission to a place he called the most segregated city in the United States. protesters were arrested. They were pressing the city to eliminate laws that sought to keep blacks and whites separated in schools, restaurants, and many other public places. Historian Robert Corley says King and the local civil rights leaders needed this strategy to succeed.
There had been no movement whatsoever in the city toward any form of desegregation of any of its institutions. And so King was saying, if we can win in Birmingham, if we can come to Birmingham and prevail, then we can win anywhere.
King and his followers were met with fierce resistance from the police. Public Safety Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor, backed by the majority of white residents, was determined to stop the demonstrations. Without enough volunteers to continue the protests, King and other leaders enlisted hundreds of young school children to keep the marches going and fill up the jails. The young African-American student protesters were gathered here on the steps of the 16th Street Baptist Church and hear inspirational speeches from civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They would then file from the church and walk across the street to a park where they were determined to demonstrate peacefully for equal rights.
I was arrested after we got about a block away from the church in this area.
Janice Kelsey was 16 years old when she and her schoolmates were jailed.
My mind was made up. I was going to participate. I was going to go to jail. I wanted to get my freedom.
Then on the second day of the student demonstrations, things turned violent. Police turned high-pressure fire hoses on the young people and set attack dogs on them. Birmingham civil rights leader Reverend Calvin Woods was there.
There have been some dog biting, some beating, some killing. Many people were beaten and spit on and put in jail, lost jobs. But those were minor things compared to what we felt we had to do.
The brutal crackdown was widely televised and images of the event were seen around the world. Robert Corley says this incident galvanized new support for the civil rights movement.
It was really that children's crusade that really turned the tide, because it did serve the goal of filling up the jails and forcing the white community to come to the table with King and negotiate some sort of settlement.
Eventually, King and Birmingham city leaders reached an agreement. Within months, the local segregation laws were abolished. Reverend Wood says King's determination to keep the movement going made all the difference.
But we would not have accomplished what we did if it had not been for the support and leadership that Dr. King brought.
The Birmingham campaign was a climactic battle of the civil rights movement. For many, it stands as an iconic symbol of the sacrifices made by King and thousands of African Americans. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay, and after the incident at Birmingham, Alabama, this is kind of when JFK took a more solid stance on civil rights. He originally in his presidency, he approached it kind of cautiously because, he wasn't sure what he was gonna do maybe as president or how much he could get accomplished. But after this, he was like, we're gonna back civil rights legislation. It's gonna happen. And this leads us to the March on Washington, which was August 28th, 1963. And at this march, you're gonna have over 200,000 people. It was a joint effort between multiple different organizations to put this on. They had different speakers and musicians throughout the day, but the main event and the most famous was Dr. King's speech. And I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's the I Have a Dream speech. And I'm going to read part of it to you, and then I'm going to let you listen to part of it on the computer. Okay? But here we go. First of all, do you guys know in front of what monument did Martin Luther King Jr. give this speech?
Lincoln.
The Lincoln Memorial. Why is that a big deal?
Because he wanted to get rid of slavery.
He is the one who emancipated the slaves. and I believe he issued the Emancipation Proclamation end of September 1863, so 100 years before this. And in Lincoln's speech when he emancipated the slaves, he started it 77 years ago, which means 87 years ago. So I'm going to read how Martin Luther King started his speech, and you're going to see the similarities, how he's referencing that. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the Negro is suffering in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there is something that I must say to my people. We must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Okay? Now, I'm going to let you listen to the end of it here in just a second, but first let's talk about that. When he's talking about being there to cash a check, what is he talking about?
They're there to get their rights.
They're there to get their rights, okay? Because, like, let's say Brenna babysat my kids all summer. I was like, Brenna, I'm going to pay you $1,000 at the end of summer. Brenna gets that check, she goes to the bank to cash it, and they say insufficient funds. Brenna, how would that make you feel?
I'd be mad.
She'd be mad. She put up with my heathen children for 2 whole months, and then I stiffed her. Okay? So she's ticked. But that's exactly what Dr. King is saying about African Americans. That our forefathers said all men are created equal. He promised them that. But here we are, over 100 years after our Declaration of Independence, after our Constitution, and that promise has not been realized. Okay, so essentially they cashed a check and got insufficient funds. All right, and I'm going to let you listen to the very end because, I mean, I can't do it justice like Dr. King. But it's pretty much understood that the last 2 minutes of his speech, they were improvised. Like he just did it there at the end, like it wasn't written out.
Be able to sing with new meaning. My country tears thee. We land of liberty and be our sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims' pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Stone Mountain, Georgia, that's, you know, kind of the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, so a little over 2 weeks after that took place, at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, there was an attack. Someone bombed the church in hopes to kill Dr. King. They didn't. Instead, they killed 4 little girls going to Sunday school. This is what hate does. Okay. This is what hate did. It took the lives of 4 innocent children. Okay. And it's not right. Another hit to the civil rights movement. November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. And he supported civil rights. And we'll talk more about his assassination in the next chapter. But the reason that this is such a hit, his vice president and new president now is Lyndon Baines Johnson. He's from Texas. He doesn't have a proven civil rights record. Nobody really knows what this guy is going to do. So we're kind of like, is he going to be a racist butthole, or is he, going to jump on the civil rights train? We don't know. But it turned out he jumped on the civil rights train. And he urged Congress to pass the Civil Rights Bill. He said, our president, John F. Kennedy, he fought for civil rights. And the greatest way to honor this man is to pass this civil rights action, or the Civil Rights Act, in his honor. Southern senators tried to stop it from happening. They filibustered, which a filibuster is giving super long speeches trying to delay the passage of legislation. And they did this for 80 days. 80 days. That's almost 3 months. But it didn't work. Because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, and, the one that was in 1957, it honestly didn't do a whole lot. This one will. It bans segregation in public areas. So it's illegal to have white-only or black-only stuff anymore. In addition, it called for the desegregation of public schools. Okay, this had already been called for, but now it's put into law. And it made it a crime to violate someone's civil rights. The act in 1957 just said, we'll investigate violation of civil rights. But this one says, we're going to do something about it. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was established. And what that's going to do, it's going to enforce the provisions of this law and give them the ability to investigate job discrimination. Okay, so this law is going to get crap done. There you have it. Is that the last one? All right, so we're going to go ahead. Let me turn this off.